Hello and welcome in to another episode of the Fantasy Football Forecast. I'm your host, Trevor Scott, doing a solo episode today, and I am very excited to get into a mock draft. I'm going to be doing a 3 wide receiver Superflex draft from the 5 spot. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button, drop us a like, it helps our channel out a lot. And without further ado, I want to get straight into it. So I'm doing it from the 5 spot because I feel like I'm starting to warm up to this position a lot. I feel like in 10 team, the 3 top quarterbacks and then Chase and Jefferson go in those first 5 picks. So depending on who falls to that 5th spot can kind of dictate your strategy from there. You either go hero quarterback or you get a stud wide receiver, and you could try and load up on receivers early, which is something that we always are a big proponent of here at this channel. So let's get the draft started here, and let's see who ends up falling to me at that 5th pick. So perfect. I get to go heavy on the wide receiver, which is the strategy I kind of want to show you out of the middle of the draft. I feel like being in the middle gives you a pretty big ability to be nimble and pick whichever receiver kind of falls in each tier at the top. So I'm going to go with Justin Jefferson here. I feel very strongly. I have Jefferson as my number 1 wide receiver over Chase. That's a pretty unpopular opinion. I might end up changing that as we get closer to the season, but I do feel pretty strongly about it right now. Jefferson has just been more consistent year over year, and Chase, I feel like, has definitely more boom, and they obviously signed him and Higgins. The defense is still a mess, so Chase I can still see being a top end, the number 1 receiver, and he was so much better than Jefferson. So I understand, but I just think Jefferson, with the switch to JJ McCarthy in the system, I think that there's definitely more upside than we even saw last year out of him. Going to this pick now, I think I see 3 or 4 receivers go in this area a lot, so I feel very confident all the way down to Brian Thomas Jr. with this pick here, and Amon-Ra St. Brown falling is amazing for me. I have Amon-Ra as my number 5 wide receiver. I feel like he's just rock solid at this point in terms of fantasy production, back-to-back wide receiver 3 finishes, and so I'm going to go that direction here at this pick. So 2 really good receivers up top. I'm hoping that I get another one here with my next pick, and it looks like I'm going to here. So, A.J. Brown and Ladd McConkey both fall here, so I don't see that very often. I feel like one of those 2 guys usually is gone by this pick. But I will say I do have A.J. Brown ranked 2 spots. I'm sorry, I have A.J. Brown ranked 1 spot ahead of Ladd McConkey, and I want to change that so badly. And I want to take Ladd here. We're Charger fans, and we love Ladd. But I am going to take A.J. Brown because I do think that there's a level of stability here with Brown just because he's such an elite player. Obviously, the offense doesn't throw a ton. So it would be great, obviously, if he was on a high volume pass offense, then he would be an early pick, right? He would probably be a first round player. So I'm going to go with A.J. Brown here, lock up that 3rd wide receiver. McConkey goes with the next pick naturally. I do really like Ladd McConkey as well. And you can kind of see how I was saying at the top, right? At the beginning, when you're in the middle, you have an opportunity to kind of hit all 3 of these tiers of wide receiver if you do it this way, right? The super tier, and then you got the A tier, and then you got your B tier. So I feel like right down the line, you have the ability to get 3 really good wide receivers to set up your team to start here. So now looking at who fell, right? Some quarterbacks went pretty quickly here, so I'm not going to go with Caleb Williams or Drake May. I feel like I can get somebody in that similar tier a little bit further down. So I'm going to look towards the running back position here now that I've loaded up at wide receiver, and I see Breece Hall, Kyron Williams, and James Cook. So I currently have James Cook ranked the highest of this group. I do really like Kyron Williams, so it's a tough, tug and pull there. I feel like Kyron has just had such a stable role. McVay loves him. He's in a good offense. And that kind of applies to James Cook as well, right? He might hold out, but he's in camp currently. So I do hope that he gets all of the contract stuff situated and that he's out there week 1. I do think the volume is a little bit of a concern, but I'm hoping that he increases his volume this year. He scored a lot of long touchdowns. They had some weird game script games, and I'm hoping that they're playing a little bit more competitively. I think the player is really good. He's on a really good offense that wants to run the ball a lot. So I really think James Cook is a rock solid pick here in the 4th round. So we see Breece Hall, Kyron Williams, Marion Hampton, a little running back run there. Rashee Rice, he's somebody that we got news that probably isn't going to be suspended this year. So I do expect, as we see him on the field, to continue to rise, because I think, over this group in the fourth round, I could see him being a 3-4 round turn here, because I think I would put him right up next to Garrett Wilson in the rankings. If I know he's not going to be suspended and I see that he's playing that he's playing, moving around on the field, and is a full go for week 1. So now this is probably the time where you want to start looking towards quarterback a little bit, right? We see Kyler and Caleb go, and there's definitely going to be a drop off of quarterbacks here after Purdy, Stroud, May, and I do have Goff in that tier as well, who's the 4th quarterback on the board. So from my perspective, I'm going to take the player that I personally have ranked the highest, which is Jared Goff. In Superflex, I think it's important to stress that the safety at the position, you get somebody that's a pocket passer, good offense, high volume. I do think that there's something to be said for that at Superflex, right? And I think I do my rankings that way, anticipating that these guys that have high floors are very valuable and they do really help stabilize your team. And in the 5th round, right, I'm not taking a shot on trying to get all the way up to like a quarterback 3. And maybe that's to my detriment sometimes, but I just would much rather have a stable producer that I know for sure is going to be good. And that to me is Jared Goff here. So I'm going to go with Goff in the 5th and see who ends up falling to me here. I do like taking a receiver in this range now again, right? If I go heavy on receiver, I want to try and get a really good receiver in my flex spot. So looking at who went, McLaurin, Tyreek, and Travis Hunter, that leaves Mike Evans on the board, who I currently have in my top 20. Another guy that's still up here that I have in my top 20 is also Davante Adams. So I think my decision is between those two players, Mike Evans and Davante Adams. Some of the other guys, I have Worthy as my next highest ranked guy, but that's outside my top 20. Everybody else you see here, I have ranked outside my top 20 as well. So I'm going to go with Mike Evans. I feel like number 1 on a very good offense, stable role, always 1,000 yards, and I think he's a very valuable flex player there. And somebody that in your home leagues probably is going to get pushed up. I just don't know that I can count on him in the 6th round. Maybe that feels like it's a little low. I know he was hurt last year, but they bring in Emeka Egbuka, who I think is going to play in the slot. So, he could be very good and could possibly steal some targets, but I think Evans' role is pretty safe and he scores a lot of touchdowns. So that gives you weekly upside, to really blow up on any given week. So looking down now, I got Davante Adams that's still there. Unfortunately, at this point in the draft, I can't really go in on a player that is going to be on my bench, right? I still have 3 starters that I have to fill. And so as much as I'd like to take Davante Adams here, I don't think I can go that direction. So let's see who else made it down here. So we got Jordan Love and Dak Prescott and RJ Harvey at running back. So let's check out the rest of the running back rankings, because I do like RJ Harvey quite a bit. But this next range of running backs, David Montgomery, I feel like drops a lot into that 8th round slot. So if I could go down from RJ Harvey to David Montgomery and lock in my favorite quarterback here, because I do feel like it falls off pretty quickly after Jordan Love and Dak Prescott. So I'm going to go in with Dak. I still have a lot of faith in Dak. I think he's going to be a top 10 quarterback this year, especially if he stays healthy and if CD's healthy, right? His hamstring is better and CD's shoulder is better, right? And I think that there's an opportunity there for a lot of upside. I mean, we've seen with Dak, I feel like he gets, kind of pushed down, like he doesn't have a ton of upside or something. But I don't think that's the case. You look at his player card here. I know he had a really bad season last year. So this is me writing off last season. He had a really tough schedule up front. CD wasn't fully right, and he also wasn't fully right. But you look at everything else, right? And I know he's been hurt a couple years, but it's been 3. He's on pace for a top 5 finish. 8, he's on pace for a top 5 finish. He was actually quarterback 1 through these 5 games, and then 2, so he's been extremely productive when he's on the field. And so I'm going to bank in the 7th round. This is as low as you've ever been able to get Dak Prescott in the preseason. So I'm going to just bank on the talent and on the fact that we've seen it from him a lot, that he's a high-end producer. So David Montgomery, unfortunately, didn't make it back to me. So, the range of running backs that I was talking about that could make it to this eighth pick, right? James Conner, RJ Harvey, and David Montgomery, none of them made it to me. So I could go with Caleb Johnson, rookie running back, going to Pittsburgh. I don't know that I love that value, but I'm starting to look at like what other options I would have if I do pass, and I'm not sure I'm super thrilled on any of those. I do have my quarterbacks locked in. My receivers are pretty locked in now too. I could go with Jameson Williams, Chris Olave, one of these guys. I do like them quite a bit, but I do think I have Chris Godwin ranked ahead of this group. So I am pretty content to wait at wide receiver at this point in the draft. And just taking a look at tight end, there's TJ Hawkinson that I could take up here that I do have ranked quite a bit ahead of this group, but I'm also not 100% sold on taking a tight end super early, just because in a 10-team league, especially if you don't think more than 10 are going to go, or maybe 11 or 12, that there can be a lot of value at the end of your draft at the tight end position. So I'm going to look back at running back, and I'm going to take a shot on the rookie, Caleb Johnson. And I feel like it's important to talk through that part, that type of pick, right? You're hoping somebody gets to you. It doesn't really work out. You got to evaluate the full scope of all of the options, right? You have a need at running back, so that's kind of where you already know you want to go, and just make sure that you check in on the rest of your team here. So at running back now, I feel like there's a lot of down here at running back. Swift, he has kind of survived the draft and free agency, so he could be a pretty good pick in redraft. In dynasty, I'm not necessarily as sold on him. Aaron Jones got Jordan Mason added to the backfield, so there's at least that uneasiness setting in, right? And then Tony Pollard, I think, is still going to be the number one, but he still has Tajay Spears there to compete with. So there's a lot of question marks in the running back ranks here. And I was just hyping up Chris Godwin, right? And that's where I intend to go with this pick. Let's check in on tight end, right? Hawkinson and Kelsey went, so I'm not going to be taking tight end. I don't think there's a lot of guys here I still would be absolutely okay with as my starter. So looking down back to Godwin, I know I picked Mike Evans, but I do think it's totally okay to have both of these guys on your team. They were both very productive last year. Godwin is my first bench player, and so I think when I need him, I'm going to be able to plug him in. And if anything happens to either Evans or Godwin, it just adds that much more upside to the other player. So I feel good about that pick there. Looking at the running backs that went, so many running backs went off the board there, right? Swift, Jones, Tracy, Robinson, Pollard. So I would have really liked to get one of those guys, because now running back is getting really thin. So maybe this is another lesson in, attacking the position a little bit earlier, like with the Mike Evans pick. Maybe I could have gone Travion Henderson or Ken Walker right here, and then hoped somebody landed here, but then I could have maybe taken Swift as my third, and Olave here, right? So there was a little bit of draft strategy that I could have done slightly different, but I think I'm in a good spot overall, right? I do think running back is the easiest position to fill, especially during the year. There's a lot of injuries and guys that kind of come out of nowhere. So looking at the running backs, I'm not taking Travis Etienne. I'm not that big on Etienne, really. Let's take a look at the all. I could go with the Mark Andrews route, but again, I'm waiting at tight end. And there's a lot of good young receivers in this area, but again, I'm already at 5, and more importantly, I spent all three of my first picks on receivers. So I don't want to go back to receiver. I think I'm going to go in at running back. And looking at the running back ranks, I would love Jaylen Warren, but I already picked Caleb Johnson, so I feel like it's kind of important not to go that direction. And so I think I'm going to pick Najee Harris here. He's not the best player, but he is a veteran who's very solid, right? And I think that they can rely on him there in LA. And overall, not huge on Najee Harris, but I do think he can help stabilize my running back room early in the year and give me somebody that I can play if I absolutely need to have him. So again, let's look at all. I do wish that they would pick these quarterbacks a little bit faster as the third options, right? You get teams like Team 2 that doesn't pick them till really late, right? And they get two pretty solid options. But for me, I'm going to go back to the quarterback position, because this is about the time where if you have weighted at quarterback, you want to try and get in here. I know I feel pretty good with Dak and with Goff as my two quarterbacks, but with a guy like JJ McCarthy, who I feel like has a lot of upside, I want to just take the shot now, and then I can kind of just take take quarterback off my board, maybe until the very last round type of thing. So I'm going to go with McCarthy here. I think the system has shown that it can work for all quarterbacks, and I think McCarthy is going to be very productive. Right, he's kind of got his redshirt year. I know he was hurt, but he also has plenty of time to learn the playbook and show what he can do mentally. And so I do think he's uniquely positioned to be in that quarterback 20 to 22 type of range in the rankings, but finish much better than that this year. So I'm going to toggle over to flex now. We're going to start picking best available players. We love Jacoby Myers here. Obviously, he's got Brock Bowers to contend with, but I do think that Geno has showed that he can get the ball to his receivers, and so I like the Jacoby Myers pick here. I would have loved Juwan Jennings. I feel like I've gotten sniped 3 times now in this draft, but Juwan Jennings is another great player. I think that is definitely worth a pick earlier than round 12, right? I mean, I could have gone with him around 11 to secure him, but overall, don't lose sight of Jennings in your drafts. He can definitely be one of those players that elevates your team early in the season too, right? I like to get off to hot starts. And if you get a guy that you can start early in the year down here at this point in the draft, I like to go that direction, right? Your roster changes so much by week 6, 7, 8 anyways, that if you get somebody that's off to a hot start, if he starts to tail off, or if maybe you trade him, or you just have somebody else that hits, that you end up playing anyways, like I think there's a lot of value in later round picks that that you can start. And I feel like Jennings is that player. All right. And so now I feel like this worked out very well. This guy dropped right into my lap. Tucker Kraft. I do like Kraft quite a bit at tight end this year, and he's much better than anybody else that I think is that is showing on the board here. So I'm going to go with Tucker Kraft. I'm very happy about that. There's not a lot there else to say other than that's why I wait at tight end. I feel like once the value presents itself in an obvious way, that's when you should be getting in at tight end. And there were a lot of tight ends that got picked in this draft. I mean, look at all of these guys that got picked. So generally, if you're in a league where guys are trying to load up at running back and wide receiver, even more of those tight ends are going to fall, and you might have even a better option than Kraft in your mind there. 4 more running backs go off the board here with Jordan Mason, Ramondre Stevenson, Trey Benson, and Bashal Tutin. I'm going to spend these next 2 picks on running back, though, because Godwin was my wide receiver 5. Myers was my wide receiver 6. I'm pretty set up at that position. I have 3 quarterbacks. I'm not double dipping at tight end. So that leaves the one position running back that I need to try and get a couple extra guys at, right? I want to take a couple flyers here. So the first guy I'm going to do that on is Jaden Blue, right? I'm going to take a shot on a guy that might start. I know he's not the perfect prospect, but he's got a lot of speed and a pretty open backfield. So I'm going to take him. He's a rookie coming in, 5th round pick. They did pick him over guys that I thought were quite a bit better prospects. If Devin Neal would have gone here, I would have been very excited about that. And there were a couple other guys too that I kind of wish that the Cowboys had picked. But the fact that they went after Blue, I think, shows that they have a lot of confidence in him, and hopefully he can kind of take over as the passing downs back at the very least, and at the very best maybe gets 10 carries and the passing game role per game, and can be that big play hitter for them. And then the last guy that I'm going to pick here, this is a boring pick, but I do think he's worth talking about, is Austin Eckler. Eckler was great when he got the chance last year. I know they drafted a rookie, and I know that they still have Brian Robinson there, but overall, I think that Eckler still kind of showed that he can be decently productive. Now, whether or not he gets a big enough role, I don't know, but he only played 12 games and still had racked up 132 points. That's over 10 a game, and obviously the year before he was with the Chargers, but I do think that there's still something left in the tank here for Eckler. And as a last round pick, I definitely think it's worth throwing a dart and seeing how it works out early in the year. Dobbins is another interesting one that I could have picked and talked about him, but Dobbins, I think too, just signed with Denver. So if you have any sort of conviction with him that he's going to be good, this year, I think you can absolutely go in that direction late in your drafts too. If you think that he has any chance to be productive on early downs over RJ Harvey, I think he's somebody that you should be targeting late as well. So looking at my team here, I feel very confident in this team, honestly. I have Goff, Dak, and McCarthy. So I have two guys that I've ranked in my top 12 that I think are going to be top 10 producers. I have McCarthy, who I think is a great wild card pick. And again, in the 11th round, probably not going to happen because the computer doesn't do a great job. But that's about the range where I'm looking to get my third. So maybe that's Geno Smith, maybe that's somebody else down in that 25 to 30 range of the quarterback ranks, whichever guy that you feel the best about at that point, I think is the one you want to pull the trigger on. And then looking at my running back room, right, that's where I'm going to be weak with this type of a build. But I did get James Cook, who I'm very confident is going to be good as long as he's out there, right? I mean, obviously, if that situation changes, if you're listening to this now, you're obviously going to be like, well, there's a lot of risk there. Okay, I understand that. But the player himself, top 10 finish last year, and I think we are going to expect more of the same. Not 20 touchdowns, but I do think that he can get to be a top 10 running back with a little bit more volume and the high level of efficiency that he has shown. Caleb Johnson, great college running back. The Steelers picked him in the third round and they didn't have a second round pick. So I think they plan to use him heavily early in the year. And I think his role is pretty easy to predict. His volume is pretty easy to predict. So I feel good about him as my 2 down in the 8th round. Najee Harris, I'm hoping mostly out of him that he can be a stabilizer early in the year if I need him. If Caleb Johnson doesn't look good in week 1 and Najee gets a bigger role maybe than we're expecting, I could see making that swap in week 2, that type of thing. And let me get that position set up by week 6, week 7, and give me some breathing room getting into the season. And then taking the 2 flyers on Jaden Blue and Austin Eckler. I don't know if you guys are going to love those picks, but I feel like Blue is more of that long-term play that, if he starts taking over in that week 5, 6 area, that could be a situation where I'm very happy to have him. At that point in the year, we're starting to hit bye weeks, we're starting to hit injuries, and he's kind of taking over a little bit more in Dallas and becoming more of a viable fantasy player. And then Eckler might take an injury, but Eckler, I think, still has quite a bit left in the tank, and I think is being very undervalued at this point in the offseason. Obviously, the best part of this team, the wide receivers. And I just really love setting my team up like this because you get studs at wide receiver, and you just become so difficult to beat, in my opinion, especially in 3 wide receivers. And this isn't even full PPR either, so this is half PPR. But you get Jefferson, Amon-Ra, and A.J. Brown. I genuinely think all 3 of those guys can finish inside the top 10, barring injuries. They're all going to be top 10 in points per game would be my guess. And then Mike Evans, who I feel like is very solid and has upside to really be a difference maker in the flex spot in any given week, right? I mean, some weeks he might only have 4 for 30, but some weeks he might have 2 for 2 and 2 touchdowns. That's a real line he had one time. But he also might have 102 touchdowns every once in a while. So I like the upside of Evans with the touchdown stability. And then Godwin and Myers, I feel like, also are still very productive players and somebody I can turn to during bye weeks in case of any injuries. I really think those guys are going to be productive. Godwin was, top 5 in points per game before he got hurt. And Jacoby Myers finished inside the top 25 wide receivers last year. So not on points per game because Myers did play the whole year, but I do think that there's a level of safety there. Myers really picked it up in the second half of the year last year after Devontae Adams was traded. And once they kind of got their offense set up and figured out, from week 8 on, he was wide receiver, or he was a top 15 wide receiver. So I think that there's not that expectation on him, obviously. I mean, you're getting him in round 12, but I think that just highlights that he can be a player that you plug in with some level of confidence as you roll on in the season. So I really like this team. I would have liked it much better if I got David Montgomery in round 8. So maybe hindsight, I should have just waited at quarterback and maybe not gone for Dak in round 7 and just locked in RJ Harvey there and picked whichever quarterback made it back to me in round 8. Now in Superflex, that's always a risky proposition, but maybe it would have worked out here. So, all right. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Hope you guys got some value out of this. It's a very unique build. Going all heavy on wide receiver can be nervous for people that like to pick running backs as well, but I feel like I've had some success doing this in the last couple of years, and I really like how these teams turn out. So hopefully I convinced you a little bit, and I look forward to talking to you guys in the next one. Thank you so much.